to class this evening. I am going to begin by discussing, so I'm going to raise up my camera here a little bit. I'm going to begin by discussing some reminders for getting ready for Pesach. Then we're going to talk about the Sefiras HaOmer, since that starts the second night of Pesach, and we don't really have any other evenings to talk about these halachas, so we're in our home stretch when it comes to Pesach. So what we're going to begin with is an overview of what needs to be done at a bare minimum this week in order to make Pesach, and then we'll talk about Sefiras HaOmer. So your bare minimum to make Pesach is to make sure that, number one, if you're staying home. If you're going away, you just sell your chametz. If you're staying home, you are going to clean out your house from all chametz. This doesn't mean that you have to go into spring cleaning. You don't have to wash the windows. You simply have to check in all the places and in all the rooms where you have eaten bread crumbs or bread products or any leaven products throughout the year, and make a reasonable attempt to search for chametz in all of those places. The most important thing is that the obligation began at the beginning of the month of Nisan, and many people also say that it starts even from Purim time. The obligation to remove chametz and all other leaven products from your location. So you need to check in every little possible place that it could go, any place that you could go during a meal, or any place in which you eat food. Some people they have a nash while they're sitting in their room and watching TV. You're sitting and reading a book and you're having some donuts, right, in another room in the house. You should go check that room. Do you have to move gigantic pieces of furniture? No, but you at the very least need to stay on top of where you've been eating and do a general basic cleaning in all of those places. That's getting ready for most of the house. The kitchen, you have to basically take everything that is not for Pesach and put it away, or set things to the side that you're going to prepare for koshering them for Pesach. So that should be done at a bare minimum this week. You should start planning for the koshering. You should be putting things to the side. We wait for 24 hours before we kosher anything that we're going to kosher for Pesach, and you should be doing that this week. Getting the kitchen ready to be turned over, moving chametz materials either away from the kitchen or locking them up into cabinets where they won't be used, and being prepared to bring the Pesach materials up to your kitchen. And you're going to want to make sure you're prepared to kosher. The kitchen, we talked about all different types of methods of koshering the kitchen. You want to make sure that you use Ivory for koshering the sinks and the sink faucets and the spritzer that's attached to the sink as well. You can use Ivory also to kosher the countertops and to kosher the stovetop. The stovetop, that's not the part that you cook on. You're going to use libun gummer, full on fire, to kosher the actual stove itself, the part where the pot sits where the heat is, turning it all the way up and doing a setting for self-clean on your oven, or turning your oven all the way up with easy off for an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it says on the easy off. And you wanted to really thoroughly clean these things, preparing for Pesach, koshering microwaves, koshering any coffee machines that you want to use for Pesach. You also want to make sure you have, if you're staying home for the Seder, make sure you have shmura matzah. You want matzah shmura for the Seder. You want the special matzah shmura. It could be the hand shmura or the machine shmura. Either one is fine as long as it says shmura on it. You want to make sure you have that for your Seder. You also need for the Seder, you need to make charoses. Charoses is the dip that you dip the mortar in during the Seder. You want to make sure that's made of at least apples and cinnamon and some nuts and some red wine. Those are really kind of the minimum things that you need in there. There are lots of customs how to make that. You also want something for a green vegetable. Our custom is to use parsley or potato and dip it in salt water. You make sure you have that. You also need mortar. Our custom is to use romaine lettuce. Some people use icebergs, some people use horseradish. You can use that as long as the horseradish is the fresh horseradish and not the kind that you get in the jar. That one is not acceptable for the Seder. You also want to make sure that you have other apertures for the Seder, like a matzah cover, so that we can be moving the matzahs around a lot, covering and uncovering them. You want some 6-ounce to 8-ounce cups to use for everyone's arba kosos, 4 cups of wine or grape juice. Make sure you have, saying that now, I want to make sure you have kosher pesach, grape juice or wine, preferably red wine. The next level is white wine. White wine mixed with a little red to make it red. There's a preference for red. And then if you really can't do it, just use grape juice. But wine all the way down is the way that it should be preferably done. And then you want to make sure that you have enough matzah to eat 5 total kazayas for each person. So you want to have two pieces that are size of kazayas for motzi matzah. You want 1 kazayas for korech, and you want to have the 2 kazasim for afikomen. If it's too much, you can do 1 kazayas for afikomen, but that's where you want to get about 5. And you need enough to do 2 kazasim for the moror, because you have to eat the moror twice. And then for karpas, you want to use less than kazayas, so don't worry about how much that is. The less the better, as long as you have enough pieces for everybody to enjoy. So once you have all that, then the rest is kind of like, what meat do I want to get for Pesach? Make sure you buy kosher Pesach meat. Make sure it says on the package kosher Pesach. The meat is kosher Pesach. The fresh meat is kosher Pesach. Make sure all of your products are kosher Pesach. If you're not sure, consult the guides. You can use the OU app or the OU guide or any other ones that say certain products are acceptable without special Pesach certification. I have noticed this year that the number of Pesach products available on shelves has gone down significantly. The other thing to watch out for is if you're Ashkenazi, you should avoid kitnios. There are a lot of very cool kosher Pesach kitnios products out there. If you want, I provided you with a JSOR and other Sephardic lists that provide you with what products are acceptable for Sephardim for Pesach. And I will say I'm a bit jealous at the fact that there is a kosher Pesach Nutella. I'm sure I can live that for a few days, but I gotta say, when I saw that at the store, I thought to myself, wow, okay, this is probably the one item I want to make an exception for. Anyway, so if you have such a custom, to go ahead and follow it. It's not necessarily all Sephardim eat kitnios. Some Sephardim also stay away from kitnios, especially some Moroccan Jews. They don't eat any kitnios either. It wasn't a uniquely Ashkenazi custom. Some people have a custom to stay away from wet matzah products called gebaks. My family never had that custom. We ate wet and softened matzah products on a regular basis. If you know people have that custom, speak to them about what their custom is exactly. People had different customs and different expectations about that, especially if you're having them as guests for the Seder or for one of the meals for Yom Tov. And remember that Yom Tov laws are a little bit different. You should learn again how those laws apply, specifically how you can light a fire from existing flame, and so you can adjust your electric or other currents without turning them off or turning them on initially on Yom Tov. You can adjust the temperature to keep the food cooking faster or keep it from burning. Those are all acceptable modes of usage on Yom Tov for cooking. Most other things you can't do. Don't touch the lights. Don't do those things. Don't use electric appliances. So those things are all still off limits, but you can definitely cook on Yom Tov this year, and there's no need for an Eruv because it's not bumping into Shabbos this year. So make sure you get yourself ready for Pesach. Have those things available. Get those ready. Let's talk about the mitzvah of counting the HaOmer. So there is a mitzvah to count the HaOmer. Okay, so the mitzvah to count the HaOmer is in Vayikra, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23, verses 15 and 16. And it says, Usfartem lachem mimacharas hashabbos. Count for yourselves after the first Yom Tov day of Pesach. Miyom haviachem es Omer hatanufa. After the day you waved the Omer, which was the bundle. That when you waved it, that was the one that was the barley one, which you waved on the first day of Pesach. So after that, Sheva Shabbatos Timimos Tiyena, You now count 7 full weeks. And then after 7 full weeks, the 50th day, okay, if you count 49 days total, which are 7 full weeks. Tisru chamishim yom, v'hikartem mincha chasha l'Hashem. You'll bring a new offering, this is the wheat offering, to Hashem, and that is the holiday of Shavuos. So, what day of the week and what day of the count of 50, which is going to be 49, and what week of the 7 weeks we are counting. So the blessing is Asher Kiddishanu, Mitzvah Sav, V'tzivanu, all Sefiras HaOmer. There's a mitzvah to count it. Some people say it's only rabbinic nowadays. Some people say it's all Torah prohibition. But since it is a mitzvah, some people say it is a Torah prohibition. You should do it while standing. If you did it sitting, that's okay. So you should always try to recite the Sefira yourself and not listen to somebody else, but say the words yourself, even if it means saying it in a language that you understand. Okay, so you need to have intent to fulfill the obligation for the HaOmer. So you have to actually say it yourself and explicitly say it. So the best time to recite the Sefiras HaOmer, is after 3 stars come out. So on the first Seder night, that's not a problem because you can't start the Seder until after 3 stars come out. Seisi Kochavim. So there's a long-standing custom to recite Sefiras HaOmer after Mariv, which is often still with a little bit of daylight out, even though it's after Shkia and it's after sunset. So some people say they'll recite it then with a bracha, and then they'll repeat it again later after Seis. So this is if they said it, they can still continue to count the whole rest of the Sefira. So therefore, you should continue counting it. It's only if it's Mariv, it comes after Shkia. If it comes before Shkia, some say that doesn't count at all, and you shouldn't count the Sefira at that time at all. So shouldn't rely on after Plag and Mincha, but only after Shkia. So if you're doing the really early minyan, the ones that daven Mariv, even before Shkia, even before sunset, so that doesn't count. However, if you forgot to count the night before, you counted on the following day, which is still the same day as the previous evening, that's okay, but you say it without a bracha, and that allows you to continue to count that evening with the bracha. If you forget to count the Omer, you blew it, okay? The reason why is because there's a number of people who say that every single day is a part of the mitzvah, and so it's not just counting the weeks or just counting the days or counting every single day as a mitzvah, but make sure you have the count right. Therefore, if you skip the night, then you cannot count with a bracha any other night. So that's a settled opinion on that. And some people say that if you did forget, so we follow the opinion. You can continue to count, and you can listen to somebody else recite the bracha, and that will be okay as well. So, but we are still strict for those who say that if you miss it, you should not count. Okay. If you got the day wrong, that's considered having missed it. If you're not sure that you said, if you missed the entire day, that's okay. If you're not sure, if you're in doubt if you said it, but you've been saying it, you can continue counting with the bracha. That's here. Let's see. If you did forget, you shouldn't daven Mariv that week, so that way you aren't making bracha for other people, unless the Rav of the shul does it. Some places that we don't have to worry about that. So but also say you mess up the counting. Let's say you do it in a way where you count the correct number of days, but the weeks are wrong, or you have the weeks right and the days wrong. You never fix it. It's also considered losing the count of the Omer. So that's basically the correct and right way to do the Omer. Is you have to know the night, you have to have the intent to fill it, to fulfill the mitzvah of counting Omer for that night. You say the bracha, Asher Kiddishanu B'Tzav V'Tzivanu Al Sefiras HaOmer. You count the Omer with the proper day and the proper week, if the week is applicable, starting with the end of the first week. And then you are done. There are some prayers beforehand and afterwards, which you can say those as well. Those aren't the essential part of it. Now, there's a question of what if somebody asks you the day of the Omer? Okay, so this is like everybody's favorite little game to play. There's an old joke about there's a couple and they have both recently returned to Judaism and are called Bali Tshuva, and it's during the Omer, and the Baal Tshuva wife asks the Baal Tshuva husband, "What would you like to have for dinner tonight?" And he responds with, "Last night we had chicken." We get very used to not saying the actual day, so that way they don't lose the mitzvah. So why the answer with yesterday was this number and this number of weeks. So because you say today is such and such day of the Omer with such and such weeks, then you are intending to fulfill the obligation somewhat, and you have said it, and then you can't say the bracha anymore. So that's where the customers come to bait and develop to just say, last night we counted this. So if it's before sunset, you can answer, well, tonight is going to be, because you're not saying that now. So, and if you're acknowledging tonight, it means that you have no intent to fulfill the obligation right now. You could also say, I'm not fulfilling my obligation, and I'm telling you tonight's date. But that's just not what we do. Another way to get around this problem is if someone asks you about the day of the Omer and you just say a number. What the custom is to say, last night we did. That's every favorite thing to do. So also some too, if you answer with an abbreviation, if you say tonight, someone asks you let's say it's the fourth night of the Omer and asks you what's the night, what do we count tonight, and you say Dalid, and Dalid is gematria of 4. The same thing with the same 4. 4 days of the Omer. So even though that doesn't count, if you said that, if you said the biggest problem is just log ba'omer. If you make the bracha and then you say tonight is log ba'omer, so you intend to fulfill the obligation. You know what the words meant. You shouldn't repeat again with the bracha, but repeat what you've said again with the proper enunciation. Tonight is the 33rd night of the Omer, etc. Let's see a couple other. If you gave one day -1, doesn't count. So people say maybe it does. Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So the obligation of counting the Omer is a positive time-bound commandment, and therefore women are exempt. So that's kind of cute. It's kind of a fun thing. So, and you should really do the mitzvah before you sit down to have a meal. The exception is at the Pesach Seder. So because that mitzvah comes first. So otherwise, you should make the counting before you have the meal. But since the Seder itself is the mitzvah that's already come first, and it's a more strict mitzvah and a certain mitzvah, therefore it comes first, and we've got the Sefira afterwards. Otherwise, every other big meal, you should wait until you count Sefira and then have a meal. What about a cool situation where a child became bar mitzvah, boy became bar mitzvah during Sefira? So, Sephardic custom, according to Rav Yosef, is to count without a bracha. But Ashkenazi poskim say you may count with a bracha. It's actually a fun Shari Tshuva. It's a fun one if you can read the Hebrew. And it's Shari Tshuva in 49:20. And the reason why they say that this is the case is because you need to continue counting all the nights. So it's not that you were not continuously counting all the nights. If you've been counting it up until this time, then you can go ahead and do that. So it's one of those interesting laws that it should have been in the Mishnah Berurah, but it wasn't. I like to point it out because it's a cool halacha that was brought down very much applicable. And in the same vein, a person who converts to Judaism should continue counting, but counts without a bracha for the opposite reason. The reason why they explicitly state in that Shari Tshuva is because at least the Jewish child for sure is going to come into mitzvos against anything else other than growing up and continuing to age into it. Whereas a convert has to actually make a personal status change. So that is the big difference. If you have some time and if you miss, I'll read just some of the language of it, but I don't know if I'll have extra time for that. Maybe I'll make a video just about that itself. It's really an interesting Shari Tshuva. So it's important that before you count the Omer, you should know the number of the day which you're going to count, and then make the bracha. But if you just sort of went in with the bracha and then we're like, that'd be okay. We don't actually say what page am I on. You can kind of scan for it afterwards, but you should scan for it first and then make the bracha. Okay, and you should also make sure that you count the day and the week at that time. And if you weren't sure, you wait to hear it from your friend. That's okay, but really you should know ahead of time. Put an app on your phone to get sure ready. Okay, and you should also say today is the day HaOmer. Some people like to say HaOmer, but HaOmer is, that's fine. You can say one of those two, HaOmer or HaOmer. Let's see. A couple other cool rules over here. Okay. It's just make sure you read it out of it. So, let's let me talk about the HaOmer and the HaOmer. Some people say they recite both. So the HaOmer is brought down in the Ramah, and so it reflects the fact that there are people who hold that it is a Torah commandment, and that even today it's still called. We are saying we are still within the time period of the Omer. So, and saying that it belongs HaOmer, which is not brought in the poskim the same way. It's brought in other places that it's brought from other places. They're implying that there was a time when we used to actually bring it, and we don't do that anymore. So those seem to imply that it doesn't count anymore. So the other one is fine, but the older minhag is to say HaOmer. There's a later minhag brought down in the Mishnah Berurah to say HaOmer. My minhag is to say HaOmer. I think that's also the Vilna Gaon also says HaOmer, but Mishnah Berurah brings down later poskim who say that should be HaOmer. Let's finish off about the other part of the Omer, which is not really the mitzvah itself, but a custom that developed centuries later after the time period of the oppressive Crusades, which was to restrict practices and we have small amounts of mourning during this time period. Let's see. Question. Many women have opted to perform the count. If a woman has been consistent in this for many years, should she continue? Come back. Should she continue, or can she stop the activity since it is not mandatory? Well, okay. So your question is more of a: is this a vow of some kind, or is a hanhoga tova? It's a good thing that you've done it for many years, and that's one that you should continue. It might be that if you find it difficult to continue, that you should stop, and that you would probably need to be released from that custom. There is a possibility of that. So it's a good question. If you've been doing it, you should keep doing it. But if you find that you can't, then it would be okay. And for Sfardim, it wouldn't matter because you can't make the bracha anyway. But for Ashkenazim, when they allow women to make the bracha, it's really more practical. So I would say that since you have accepted upon yourself to do it, that and such is the custom for women to go ahead and do these mitzvahs, that would be acceptable. Okay, so let's talk about the abstinence periods during the Omer, and there's so many different customs. So one is beginning right after Pesach until Lag BaOmer is when we follow the mourning period. The one is the other one is the other one is the following from Rosh Chodesh ER and then until right before Shavuot, but not Lag BaOmer. And those are the 33. And that's just to have 33 days altogether. So those are really the three. This is the first half, the second half, or just 33 altogether. So basically, we break it up into there's three customs basically: the first half, the second half, and the whole thing. My custom growing up was to do the whole thing, except for Lag BaOmer, and then some people like to take haircuts on Rosh Chodesh when it fell on Friday. That I've seen from people who went to Yeshivas Chafetz Chaim. It was a custom of the Chafetz Chaim, Alav Shalom, to be lenient in that. So those are some of the many customs. Some people say that the custom is predicated on your community. Some people say it's a personal one. So really, what it comes down to is whether or not you can have marriages. So what happens is that what ends up being is that the communities who's ever has different custom, they just allow marriages to happen when it's not certainly Sphira. And the certain Sphira is where everybody agrees is Rosh Chodesh ER until Lag BaOmer. So basically, just for that short time period, no one gets married. So really, that's the one thing. Everyone would agree also that with the 3 days before Shavuos, you could also have a wedding. I've in the past been invited to events during Sphira, and I was encouraged to follow the opinion of Moshe Feinstein, which is that it's predicated on what the community does, not what you do. If you personally are refraining from things, but you're invited to an event, and it would be a big deal if you didn't come. So that's one thing. Some people feel that it's a big deal to not have music during Sphira. Some people feel it's also a big deal to not dance. These things are mentioned in passing in the Achronim, but the biggest one is to not cut the hair. So that's the number one thing to refrain from doing, is to not getting a haircut. So for Ashkenazi practice, women may cut their hair during Sphira if there's an absolute need. But for Sephardim, women may cut their hair during Sphira without worrying about anything. And then there's also you're allowed to go ahead and perform certain amounts of grooming, so combing and brushing is perfectly okay. The other thing is let's see, if there's a holiday such as a bris that happens during the Sphira. So the father of the baby, the moil, and the person holding the baby for the bris, known as the sandik, they can all get haircuts and shaves. So those things are all appropriate. So shaving, let's talk about that for a minute. So definitely there is a long-standing custom with Ashkenazim and Sephardim not to shave or take haircuts. But some people are lenient when Rosh Chodesh and Friday, Erev Shabbat fall together to be super lenient on that day. They allow shaving on that day. I mentioned that a second ago. Some people are lenient on Yom HaAtzmaut, that's the 5th of ER, to take a shave. Some people are not lenient on that. And some people may trim the beard, especially if it's interfering with eating. So, for example, if the mustache part gets in your way, or this part kind of gets in your way while you're eating, and it's annoying, you can trim that back. And yeah, but some people, if they will lose their job, for example, if they're showing up unshaven, they can continue to shave. So that would be a different thing. You also should refrain from making shechianu or wearing new clothes, but it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as during the 3 weeks. That's a little bit more stringent. So if you need to buy something, you can go ahead and do that. So some people say that listening to music is only prohibited when it's at a party and when it's live music. So some people permit a cappella music or any type of recorded music. Some people are just stringent during this time period because they're lenient during the rest of the year, even though there's no reason for this practice. Later poskim said, I don't know why people have been lenient all year long. Some poskim say that you can listen to it while doing work or working out. So because then you're doing it, and this is actually permitted all year long, according to those same poskim, because you are basically doing it to break up the monotony. And some people basically say that if you play music while you get up in the morning, the problem actually is when you get up in the morning, you take a shower, you do those routines, and you have music playing, and when you go to bed, you play music again. That's the prohibition. That's brought down in the Ramah itself. So that's what some people are lenient, that if you're just doing it to break up the monotony of the day and you sing songs for yourself and so on, that would be problematic. So I think we're going to hold the class here for tonight, but I will delay for a moment or two if you have some questions. So I will go over that that little. We have a few minutes. I'm going to go over that Sharei Tshuva real quick. It's quite interesting. I think it's rather brief. So let me pull it up here real quick. The idea is that someone becomes able to say the blessing on Pesach. Okay. Laws of Sefiras HaOmer. Let's look up the Shari Tshuva here. Shari Tshuva. Let's see, which one are you? It's not too long. Where are you? Where are you? Okay. Okay. All right, let's see. Let's see. All right. Let's see. He has all sorts of questions in here, such as people who couldn't say it all day long, like an own name person lost somebody on that day. So, okay. All right. Also look at the Sefer Birkai Yosef. He says, in the name of the book Pri Haaretz, a child who grew up over 13 years and 1 month inside of the Omer to a convert who converted. They can count all the other. That's the first day of appointment. He says, and if they converted on the first day of the Omer, I don't know how he did that. Let's say he did. He can count that day without a bracha, and then he can continue with a bracha. Now, when we say that a katan can't do that, we don't agree, because by us, children that are old enough to understand to count are responsible to count, and he's also old enough to really be an adult. And if he were to wait to count until he grew up, he would have missed all of the Omer. So yeah, so if he wasn't doing it, then sure he shouldn't say it. But he's saying that he's arguing that probably he should. I found another source that says that if you forgot to count on Friday and now you daven while it's still daytime, the Mariv for Friday night, so, and you don't forget to count, if you forget to count the Omer, since it's still daytime, he can count without a bracha and then continue to recite the other days with a bracha. So that's his statement over here. But that's all he says about a child. He brings on one person who says a child can't say it, and then he says, yeah, but if he's just started counting this year, so he should definitely keep on counting with a bracha. Okay. So that's what he's saying there. So that's an interesting statement of the Shari Tshuva. So it's a very, very pithy statement, but that's where it's found. All right, since there's no other further questions, we can hold it here for tonight, and we will resume this class after Pesach. So I will see this class in May. There will be other classes the rest of the week. Thank you, everyone, very much for coming out tonight.